Hello, I'm Jake Boudrot, Civic Journalist at Community Television. This week, on The Record, an unused building in St. Peter's gets a second life. Nova Scotia's Lieutenant Governor bids a fond farewell. And I attended the December 10th regular monthly meeting of Port Hawkesbury Town Council. After the meeting, I spoke with Director of Finance Aaron McCacken and Mayor Brenda Chisholm-Beaton. But first, a national organization pushing for gender parity in politics takes a look at Nova Scotia. With me today is the Executive Director of Equal Voice, which is a nonpartisan national organization dedicated to promoting the participation of women and gender diverse individuals in Canadian politics. Welcome, Chinh Nguyen.
Very nice to meet you, Jake. Thanks for having me on today.
On November 28th, which was 2 days after the election here in Nova Scotia, your group issued a press release saying the results highlight the need to work toward gender parity in politics, noting that the overall representation of women and gender diverse individuals in the Legislative Assembly remains unchanged at 36.4%, the same percentage as in 2021. How does this number compare to the rest of Canada?
That's a great question, Jake. We've actually had a really exciting provincial fall election season. So we've seen increases in nearly every legislature that had an election this time around. British Columbia actually surpassed the 50% mark, getting to 52.9. Saskatchewan saw an increase as well, I think going from 27 to 35%. And the other legislature that saw some real gains was the New Brunswick legislature. And so across the board, we've seen some shifts and some movement. It is important to note that Nova Scotia still has what we call critical mass. Critical mass is this concept of having enough of a group of people so that the people who are part of that group aren't tokenized in their experience. So we think about that when we hit 30%. And then once that starts to happen, we know that culture change can start to happen and things start to look a bit differently in terms of the practice. So that's still a really good achievement, but it doesn't get us quite as close to the 50% gender balance that we want to see in legislatures across the country.
Now, you mentioned that there are some gains, I guess, in Nova Scotia. NDP leader Claudia Chender becoming the first woman leader of the official opposition. But your group Equal Voice acknowledged that is progress, but your group's analysis reveals that much more must be done to ensure a legislature that truly reflects the province's diverse population. What can be done in Nova Scotia to make these gains?
One of the things that we talk about at Equal Voice, and we actually work from a really interesting perspective in that we work with all the political parties. We're multi-partisan and invite them to work with us, alongside us. And we were really thrilled to actually work with the government of Nova Scotia through a bit of a partnership there. We run campaign schools, which is one of the ways in which we help to make it a bit easier, kind of demystify the process of what an election campaign looks like. Many good citizens actually have a lot of the skill sets that we want to see in politics, but a lot of people don't think about it as an option or something that they want to be involved in. And so what we do through our campaign schools is really help women and gender diverse folks see that if you kind of map out a bit of a plan, you can pull things together and really have the impacts and see some change. So actually, a couple of the candidates who were in a campaign school with us back in the winter were actually elected to the municipal council in Nova Scotia this year. So we were really delighted to see that.
Now, you pointed to the campaign schools that you offer. You offer those, I assume, nationally in every province that is demanded. How does that process work for getting these campaign schools up and running and completed in each of these jurisdictions?
Yeah, so we like to look at the election calendar and get into a province sort of a year and a half, 2 years out before an election, or sort of in that time window, because we know it takes time to put together a team, think about the plan, think about what you need to have in place so that you can put your name forward as a potential candidate. So we like to have that runway because we know that for people, and it's often women who are managing many many demands in terms of home and work and life. And so to be able to make these things happen, you need the time to plan. So we use that as a bit of a way to kind of forecast and say, where should we get to next? This past year, we've run 8 campaign schools. We always do 2 cohorts online. So across the country, it gives opportunities for us to catch people in the in-between or as they're starting to think about what that might look like. So that's one of the pieces of work that we take on at Equal Voice. The other piece of it is to actually understand what's happening in legislatures to make them better and safer workplaces. We know that there are issues that all politicians face. Being in the public eye, requires that you do open yourself up to the possibility of some criticism and critique, but we also are seeing a bit of an increase and an uptake in you know more aggressive or more violent responses from the public or from folks who are feeling some frustrations in their lives right now. And so how do we prepare candidates to think about what that looks like and to be ready for that experience, and what can we do to make these conditions easier? The job itself is often seen as a thing that you're often doing a lot of sacrifices around. So, some of the things that we're seeing adaptations around actually came out of COVID. So things like using hybrid parliaments. These are ways in which we can adapt and make our legislatures more modern, more contemporary, and potentially ensure that you have a little bit more balance in how you're approaching these work. And so that's part of what we do at Equal Voices. We take a look at the system and say, what can we try? What experiments can we put out there? What's working in different jurisdictions that we should be adapting and making possible so that this work is easier. We need great people to lead us, and we want them to feel like they can do their jobs really effectively.
Now, your group said it's important to applaud the courage and dedication of all women and gender diverse individuals who ran in the past election. Your group noted that their leadership sends an empowering message to future generations and is a crucial step toward a more inclusive society. And while it is important to have people stand for election, I assume your group is of the belief that it's even more important to get these people elected so that they can be in positions to create some change.
Absolutely. We want to see our legislatures look like our communities. And so, 50%, over 50% of populations are women and gender diverse folks. So we'd love to see that better reflected. And it's not to suggest that men don't have great ideas and don't offer important perspectives, but on balance over the history of time, we know that we've heavily overfavored a particular political perspective, and that balance is really critical, I think, for good decision making.
Do you have any evidence to believe that people are not voting for women or gender diverse individuals because of who they are and not necessarily what they stand for or necessarily what party they're representing?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jake. We actually did some polling research a couple of years ago that took a look at that. And what we actually find, and the patterns of some of the research that's out there, is that when we run a good number of women candidates, Canadians have no issue with sending them to elected office. We know that by seeing more and more women being elected. And so as we get more into the pipeline, it's not just the candidacy, but the percentage overall. If we increase the number of candidates, also ideally in seats that are winnable for those candidates, then we're going to see those returns. So we were really, really delighted by what happened in British Columbia. That is a legislature that now has a caucus that's the NDP caucus is about 66% women. The Conservative caucus is 42% women. So we know that that's going to shift how the legislature behaves and acts, and what some of the priorities might look like. So these are all really important signals that it's possible to shift and modernize and have political houses look like our communities.
Are you of the belief that with time, with changing attitudes, that jurisdictions like Nova Scotia, which are lagging behind some of the other provinces, will catch up, and that you will see more legislatures and more elected assemblies mirroring what's taking place in society and the demographics of that we live with?
It's a great question, Jake. I think one of the things that has been really challenging is that we've seen the evolution of our political systems move at a fairly slow pace. I've been studying this issue for about 25 years, and federally, we've only seen this number jump by about 10%. And that happened sort of in a bit of a wave in 2015. So we're actually sitting at 30% in the federal House of Commons and have stayed there for the last kind of 3 rounds of election cycles. All the parties ran stronger candidates of women in the last federal election, so that was a good signal. But again, we need to continue to find great candidates of all genders, but particularly for women. We know there's a lot of anecdotal evidence out there that you need to ask a woman 7 times before she'll say yes to running for office. Whereas if you ask a man, they'll say, why didn't you ask me sooner? So there's some work to be done there. I think part of it is just seeing more women be able to do this work well. And uh, the realities are this is a tough environment to be a political leader, regardless of your gender. So the supports that we can put in place so that leaders, have a sense of security, are feeling appreciated for work that's really important for our communities. It's all stuff that we can do as citizens, be grateful for their leadership. And I think that's really an important piece. I don't think it's going to happen overnight without some intentional efforts. It's taken us, 20 years to have that 10% bump, but I do think we are moving in the right ways and that we will see that change come, but we have to be thoughtful and intentional about how we um, create the pipeline of good people to do this.
Do you think ideas like what Prime Minister Justin Trudeau instituted when he became Prime Minister of having kind of quotas or some kind of goals for having so many women or gender diverse individuals in his cabinet, do you think those are type of ideas that can help move the ball a little bit, or do those kind of set unrealistic standards that can't really be met at times?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there are a number of considerations in that, and I think different parties have come at this question a bit differently. And the NDP has been really strong at being able to achieve over 50% candidate slates in many provinces and at many points over their history. And I think, it you can't you can't get to the goal if you don't actually know how you're going to get there. And so you have to have some of those markers and ways to start to measure whether or not you are starting to reflect your population. And I think it's incumbent for every party, and that's one of the beautiful things about Equal Voice is that it was started by a multi-partisan group of women who cared deeply about politics from across party lines. It's good for democracy to have different voices in all the parties, and so that's a really important piece in this. Is that it's an all hands on deck situation where every party has room to grow and get better at this, and they may come at it with hard and fast targets, and they may come at it with asking the questions: how do we make great space for women? How do we support good women stepping forward? So I think it's some intentional focus from the part of everybody in the system to make sure that we get the political systems we want.
Well, that's great. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to answer my questions and speak with our viewers. Thank you.
Great to meet you, Jake. Thanks for the topic today. Thanks for the discussion.
The Village of St. Peters was approved for non-repayable federal funding of $200,000 to transform the former NSLC store into a community hub. According to the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency, the investment will support renovations to accommodate a visitor information center, a branch of the Eastern Counties Regional Library, and Village Fitness, managed by the Village Fitness Center Cooperative. ACOA said upgrades include new walls, washroom improvements, mechanical and electrical upgrades, new lighting, and the addition of a third main level entrance. The contractor will start the building improvements this month with a planned completion date of March 2025, ACOA noted. Esther McDonnell, chair of the Village of St. Peters, said the multi-purpose facility will balance natural beauty with a thriving business community, history, heritage, active community living, and improved quality of life. Almadam native Arthur J. LeBlanc issued a statement upon concluding his tenure as Nova Scotia's Lieutenant Governor. I am filled with profound gratitude for the opportunity to serve the Crown and the people of Nova Scotia over the past 7 years. This journey has been one of deep meaning and transformation, shaped by moments of joy and celebration, as well as times of sorrow and uncertainty. Together, we have navigated these peaks and valleys, writing new chapters in our province's history that will continue to shape who we are as Nova Scotians. Throughout this time, I have been continually inspired by the warmth, generosity, and resilience of our people. Patsy and I have had the privilege of traveling across Nova Scotia, meeting individuals from all walks of life. Whether celebrating the dedication of volunteers, marveling at the creativity of artists, or witnessing the determination of those building inclusive and vibrant communities, each encounter has strengthened my admiration for the spirit that defines this province. It has been a distinct honor to uphold and celebrate the Crown's role in Nova Scotia, recognizing our shared history and fostering understanding and reconciliation. From hosting the Micmac Grand Council at Government House and celebrating the Platinum Jubilee, to the provincial commemorative service for Queen Elizabeth II and the coronation of King Charles III, these milestones have underscored the enduring power of tradition, collaboration, and the diversity that enriches our society. As I prepare to step away from this role, I carry immense pride in all that we have accomplished together and great hope for the future of our province. Nova Scotia's potential is boundless when guided by compassion, unity, and the collective strength of its people. Thank you for welcoming me into your lives, for sharing your stories, and for inspiring me with your resilience and resolve. Serving as your Lieutenant Governor has been the honor of a lifetime, and I will forever cherish the bonds forged and the memories created during this extraordinary chapter of my life. At the start of the Port Hawkesbury Town Council public meeting on December 10th, a motion from Town Councillor Blaine Macquarie to send a letter to newly elected PC MLA for Inverness, Kyle Macquarie, was approved. Town Councillor Blaine Macquarie brought up a meeting with the new MLA for Inverness, Kyle Macquarie, and wanted to invite him to a future council meeting to discuss some matters. What do you want to discuss with the new MLA?
Oh, well, first and foremost, we want to congratulate him on a successful campaign and an election. And, also to create a space so we can get to know our new MLA for Inverness. That includes the municipality of the county of Inverness as well as the town of Port Hawkesbury. And, certainly in taking that opportunity, we would love to share with MLA Macquarie a little bit about the town's history, what are our ongoing priorities, and certainly help him to kind of learn the municipal terrain on this side of his constituency.
Certainly not to take away from Kyle Macquarie's victory, but he replaces arguably the second most powerful man in provincial politics, being Alan McMaster, Deputy Premier, Finance Minister. Is there a hole left behind by Minister McMaster's departure from provincial politics?
Yeah. Well, I think it was a little bit of a surprise. For myself, I can't speak for our council. I think there was certain advantages to having the deputy premier as our MLA, and as well as all the other portfolios that he had as in addition to being an MLA, many ministerial portfolios as well. We will certainly miss the close relationship we had, that has been built over several years during his leadership in Inverness County, and that it's a little bit of a reset now, and that's okay. We will take the time to cultivate a relationship with MLA Macquarie, and yeah, we're very much looking forward to that kind of getting across the finish line, and with regard to sending a letter to congratulate him, as well as hopefully setting up a time to speak and get to know each other in the new year.
During committee reports, Mayor Brenda Chisholm-Beaton and Deputy Mayor Ian Langley talked about a regional assessment being conducted by the Strait of Canso Offshore Wind Task Force.
What do you want to discuss with the Strait of Canso Offshore Wind Task Force? I know you're a member of the task force, also mayor of the town. So what is it you're hoping is brought up and addressed?
Sure. So I guess not so much in reference to the Strait of Canso Offshore Wind Task Force, but as members of the task force, both myself and Deputy Mayor Ian Langley, the reason why we brought it up during our committee reports this evening is that there is a regional assessment for the development of offshore wind in Nova Scotia and in Atlantic Canada. We want to make sure if there are any feedback points that we would like to make, we will kind of take a little bit of a dive into that assessment, the regional assessment, try to look at it from the perspective of, how do we best position ourselves as a town, in a region that we have this emerging sector in offshore wind. We definitely want to make sure that if there is any feedback that would be pertinent to the position of the town of Port Hawkesbury, that we don't want to lose the opportunity to provide feedback. So once we do determine what kind of feedback we'd like to offer, we will circulate it to council, and if they're okay with that, we will submit that, and it'll be added to all the other feedback that they've received thus far.
Now, I'm just curious, Mayor, have you been speaking to the warden of Richmond County about this? Because you and the previous warden were co-chairs of the Offshore Wind Task Force. Have you spoken to the new warden, Lois Landry, about this?
So I not specifically with regard to the assessment, but I can share that the island wide or the Cape Breton partnership hosted. It would have been a virtual meeting that Jim Wooder provided a presentation, in his capacity on the regional assessment committee. So she was in attendance as well, Warden Lois Landry. And yeah, so I didn't have any formal conversations with her after that. But I guess the reason why I thought myself and the deputy mayor thought it was pertinent is because when you look at the makeup of the Strait of Canso Offshore Wind Task Force, there's a lot of entities that are represented on there. So for the task force to take on the role of providing feedback would mean that they would have to go back to each of their of the parties that they represent, and with regard to the timeline, it probably wouldn't be a very, I guess, it just wouldn't be timely, and plus there's a lot of people at the table, and would they want to provide feedback? Would they not want to provide feedback? So what makes sense is that if there's any of the participating parties with regard to the Offshore Wind Task Force who want to kind of take that on themselves, then certainly it's their prerogative. I'm unsure whether the warden is going to be bringing that back to her council, but I guess that would be a question for her.
Mayor Brenda Chisholm-Beaton said that in addition to serving as a board member of the Association of Municipal Administrators of Nova Scotia, she will also be serving as a board member of the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities as past president for the next year.
Are you worried that this is going to spread you thin and maybe keep you from your duties here in the town?
Oh, no, not at all. So I served just this most recent year as past president of the NSFM. Certainly not a hardship to take on that role for another year. I don't think it was a mandatory thing, but I'm happy to continue that role. So there's one thing that's for certain, and it's the uncertainty of a municipal election because every 4 years that it is a advocacy group that represents 49 municipalities all across the province of Nova Scotia, and we do know that although we like to think that we can retain staff and whether they're on the in municipalities or certainly for the NSFM in terms of business continuity, there's not that same guarantee with regard to elected officials. So sometimes things get shaken up on the board every 4 years as the approach to a municipal election occurs. So this was one such occurrence, and we have a very we have a great brain trust sitting around our NSFM board currently. I'm absolutely honored to serve as past president again, to go around the block again with the NSFM. I don't foresee it, being an onerous task. And I get part of that role is serving as a representative on the AMANS group with the administrators of Nova Scotia. Absolutely great. They're doing great work as well. So looking forward to the role.
Were you surprised that the board came to you and said, we'd like you to serve again now that Ms. Bolivar Getson has been defeated in her position?
Well, I think everybody was just kind of trying to figure out. Well, I think nobody was really premeditating anything. It was just the outcome of the municipal election, and certainly people that throw their names into the hat, you don't necessarily know what the outcome is going to be. But in terms of making sure that there was continuance for the NSFM, I was certainly happy to let my name stand for another year.
Mayor Brenda Chisholm-Beaton then talked about a presentation by Dan McDonald about the green cement project planned for the region.
This came up at the Richmond Municipal Council's Committee of the Whole session. It was a presentation from Rochelle Sampson, who I'm sure you're familiar with Cabreton Regional Enterprise Network, about green cement. It was a presentation by Dan McDonald, which you brought up tonight, and
We did.
You said you found interesting. What was interesting about that presentation?
Well, what's really interesting is that, there's a lot of kind of sprouts that, could potentially grow off the emerging sector around green energy. So this is one such potential kind of offtake in terms of supporting industries that, could cultivate around, just the apex of green hydrogen for Canada here in the Strait area. There could be all kinds of other, kind of secondary business opportunities. So it sounded like a really interesting proposal. When you kind of take a look at that idea, it's like we have all the right ingredients, but to bake that cake, to bake the cement, but at the end of the day, it's about I guess the next step would have to be looking at what are next steps. Well, I think it's just kind of creating, I guess, more of a business case for it. Like right now, it's kind of an idea.
Yeah.
And you got to kind of, create a sustainability study or something along those lines.
To bring the town's new council up to speed, Director of Finance, Aaron McCacken, presented the town's current financial picture.
So obviously you gave your report this evening about the way things are looking in terms of the town's expenditures and revenues. It looks like the numbers are very positive when lined up to what was actually budgeted. Can we start with revenues and look at that? And I mean, just give a general snapshot. You don't have to go with the explicit figures, but what can you tell us about what seems to be working in the town's regard right now in terms of revenue and why you think that is?
So yeah, we did a report to October 31st, looking at actual figures compared to budget. A lot of the variances are positive at this point in time, but many would be considered timing variances. So just timing of when revenues occur versus when you've budgeted them. But we are seeing positive variance on our digital transfer tax, which is relative to land transactions that occur. And the municipality does garner some revenue from that. So that's looking positive in comparison to our budget at this point in time. So yeah, so things are not looking negative right now, which is a really good position to be in. But I wouldn't get too excited. It's, early in the year. These are October 31st figures, so we have a long winter ahead of us. But yeah, right now, not seeing anything that's trending negatively that we're concerned about at this point in time.
Do you have any breakdown of residential or commercial taxes, or even just a general ballpark figure on how those are looking for the town this year as opposed to what was budgeted?
Yeah, so assessments are pretty predictable. So we're usually very, very close in our commercial and residential taxes compared to budget, and that's what we're seeing right now. So our grants in lieu, which is our municipal taxes that we receive, or grants in lieu on provincial and federal properties, are very, very consistent with budget, as is our commercial and residential taxation.
Any surprises in this regard?
No, we use assessment and we multiply by our tax rate. We allow for a little bit of assessment adjustment based on appeals, but it's a pretty predictable revenue stream, which is what municipalities need.
Okay. How about expenditures? Are there any surprises there, or as with revenues, it does look like things are lining up with budget, and in one case you mentioned coming under budget, Public Works and Engineering $75,000 down. What do you account for in this regard?
Yeah, so again, a lot of the variances we see right now are timing variances. So just, we budget on a monthly basis, and there's expenditures that have not occurred yet, but we intend to see by the end of the year. But there are some, smaller variances on, numerous accounts that we're seeing on administrative costs, along with some roads and street costs that we've seen so far, that were maybe reflected in the final numbers at the end of the year. So that's really positive. Again, not seeing anything that's concerning on the expenditure side. Majority of our expenses are tracking under budget. Primarily those are timing related, but there are probably more than likely some variances that will come to fruition by the end of the year. And we're not seeing any concern, or don't have any concern at this point in time of a deficit at the end of the year, which is what we want to be in, the position we want to be in right now.
One thing you did mention, there was a variance on sales of service, which includes the Civic Center, and you said it was due to higher than budgeted airport rentals. Is that just more usage of the airport and more activity out there?
Yeah, so we have an airport committee that is represented from the municipality of the County of Richmond, Inverness County, and the town of Port Hawkesbury. They set the budget for the airport, and we follow that budget. I believe that budget was set after we set our budget as a municipality, so we follow the budget that was set by the airport committee. So yeah, that's above what we anticipated in the budget, but pretty consistent with where we saw revenues last year. So that's a line item that will just adjust upward next year if we anticipate similar traffic at the airport. But as I noted in the presentation, all of the surplus of the airport is deferred to be used for the airport. And it is controlled by that airport committee. So we're not going to see that in our bottom line. We're not going to have surplus based on the airport, because we do defer any surplus for that to the airport committee for their consideration.
So it's a good problem to have in a way?
Right, yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. We like airport traffic. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, but I had just one more, just on going back to Public Works being 75,000 under right now. I probably don't need to say to you that we're getting ready to go into the winter, and winter plowing and road clearing can chew up a $75,000 shortfall very quickly. So, but do you folks feel like you're prepared for that and you're ready to roll?
So we, I think, we always say this time of year, the next 3 months are when, you'll see significant expenditure on the public works side, particularly around snow and salt. We do have a reserve account that we've set up in our operating reserve to help manage those over expenditures so that we can budget kind of more consistently year over year, not for worst case scenario. So, you know, should things go awry and be kind of extraordinarily increased over previous years, we do have that ability to pull from reserve in a reserve that's specifically set up for overages for snow and salt. So yeah, it was a good planning piece that was put in place a number of years ago, supported by this council, and I think yeah, is helpful for us moving forward to try to manage any difficult years for snow.
I was curious if you have any reaction to the report given by the Director of Finance, Aaron McEachran. It looks like not only are several budgetary projections working out well and being exceeded by revenue and by lower expenditures, but I mean, there have been departments, as Aaron mentioned, Public Works, $75,000 down from what they expected at this point. What do you make of the numbers and the financial outlook for the town at this point?
Well, just I guess, two comments I can make with regard to that. Number one, we're a town on the move. We're growing. There's, you know, certainly movement on the housing file. There's new businesses opening in town. So definitely no surprise in terms of the increase in terms of assessment on both business and tax side of things. And also I have just to acknowledge the incredible capacity of the staff at the town of Port Hawkesbury. So with regard to the expenditures kind of trending below what's been budgeted, you know, they know their job and they know their job well, they do it well, and, you know, and at the end of the day, it could potentially provide more wiggle room for the town to plan to do more stuff in 2025.
You know, there's only so much that
That's right.
you can discuss this at this point, obviously, because you're only the mayor, one of the 5 elected members of council. But what kind of conversation does council have about what to do with any excess funds? Does it look at affordability measures? Does it look at more paving? You know, what kind of conversation comes if there is indeed a little more black ink than you expected at the end of the year?
Well, we certainly go through a exercise in terms of beginning and having discussions with regard to budget and determining both an operational budget and a capital budget. There's no shortage of places I think we could place any savings with regard to prior year budget. But I think it would probably start with understanding what are the options to be able to invest those savings. Is it putting it towards a bigger project or a capital project? Is it, you know, adding, services? It would probably start with a conversation of looking at like what are some of the staff priorities that they're putting forward for the new budget. And what are some of the priorities that are being brought forward from our council, and, you know, meeting somewhere in the middle in terms of, you know, where we want to see, things go with the town from either operations or from a capital perspective.
Okay.
It was mentioned tonight there were some delays in some of the infrastructure projects,
Due to weather.
largely attributed to weather.
Yeah.
I assume there's not a concern there once the weather gets better. You guys expect to get going?
Like our CAO Terry Doyle mentioned, you know, I guess mistakenly said, you know, sometimes these things happen, and he said, no, these things always seem to happen. So one thing also that is a certainty is the uncertainty of Mother Nature. So you know, there's incremental weather that can affect or delay projects. But according to the feedback that we received from our Public Works director, we think things will get done and hopefully will continue to track. And and of course, in the past, when we did have weather-related delays, some aspects of the project would have to be done, like weather pending in the spring, etc. So, you know, if that does happen, then we'll just roll with those punches and make sure that at the end of the day, those jobs are completed.
The in-camera motion alluded to some infrastructure or some projects that you guys are going to apply for under the infrastructure program. What are those projects and what's the program?
So we have a road that's unpaved, Artie Reynolds Drive. So if we want to look at continuing development within the town, this is an opportunity to potentially prepare for development.
After the meeting, Mayor Brenda Chisholm Beaton was asked about the letter being sent to Nova Scotia Public Works about the plebiscite that was held during the municipal election, as well as recommended changes to Reeve Street.
Terry may have the answer to this, but I just wondered if there was any progress from the correspondence with Public Works last month regarding the Reeve Street plebiscite. I know they were in election mode and weren't able to be active in that regard. Has there been any response since that time?
So we can probably provide an update at our next council meeting. So we haven't settled on a draft yet for that letter. So yeah, and we didn't feel that, well, I mean, we wanted to wait until the election was over because we understand that the province was in caretaker mode. There still is the process of, figuring things out with regard to the legislature and who's who and where's where, who's who
Appointing
and
cabinet
where.
members.
Exactly.
Appointing a cabinet. Yeah.
We don't have a new
Exactly.
Minister of Public Works yet for that
Yeah,
matter.
so I mean, we know who the deputy minister is, but so I guess once we have a little bit more of an indication of the correct person or persons to send that to, we will send that off and basically it's for information, just to let them know we acknowledge the election results as well as the plebiscite. And yeah, and they are the experts, and to add that with their regimen of information and data that they have, and they own Reeve Street and will make the ultimate decision. So that's basically the letter will be pretty simply put. It's just a matter of who's the receiver of the letter, and yeah, we'll finalize the draft and hopefully send that off. Should be able to provide an update at the next meeting.
Because a planned meeting between the town of Port Hawkesbury and the municipality of the county of Richmond was not held before the municipal election, Mayor Brenda Chisholm Beaton was asked if the town is still interested in meeting with Richmond County.
I know that there were talks about having a joint meeting of the two municipalities. Those dissolved over the course of the 6 months leading up to the municipal election. Is there any interest on the town's part in trying to get that going again?
Oh, absolutely. So 2025 is going to ring in all kinds of new opportunity, and we do have new faces around our council table, both for Richmond and the town of Port Hawkesbury, and absolutely interested in kind of dusting off that idea, seeing if there's interest on behalf of Richmond County Council to get together, because I mean, we share a lot of joint ventures and files. We collaborate between both municipalities, but in addition to other Strait Area and Cape Breton Island municipalities, we are around a lot of the same tables. So why wouldn't we want to get together and talk about ways that we could, support or work together on all kinds of fronts?
And new faces on both councils now, including the
Absolutely.
warden in Richmond. So,
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. So, it makes sense to do that now that we have 4-year runway ahead of us. And yeah, so I guess things work out as they should. We didn't get together with prior councils, but maybe this is an opportunity to definitely dust off that idea and engage with Richmond to gauge their interest.
Thank you for watching. Please tune in again to find out what we will be talking about on The Record.